The moon hung silver and brittle above the whisper-dark towers of the Red Keep, its light splintering across the ageless stones, as though the day had cracked, but not yet shattered. A late summer wind drifted down the Blackwater Rush, cool and sharp with the briny tang of distant storms, and it found Sansa Stark in her window seat, staring south toward the horizon, where the river met the ghost-gray sea. She could not sleep, not tonight, when all of King's Landing seemed to thrum with the promise of roses. Roses, they were everywhere. Silks from Highgarden layered the gallery halls, heavy with embroidered blossoms. Garlands twisted round the pillars, petals scattered across polished marble like pink snowmelt. Even the air tasted faintly sweet, perfumed by casks of Dornish red steeped with crushed petals to please the Tyrell palate. Somewhere beyond her chamber, a troupe of minstrels rehearsed a lilting love ballad, their lutes chiming softly, and guards in rose-enameled pauldrons paced the corridors speaking in gentle reach lilts that reminded her of summer meadows she had never seen. Tomorrow, she would marry Sir Loras Tyrell, her hands pale against the dark window ledge, twisted in her lap. She had dreamt of gallant knights when she was a girl in Winterfell, of valiant heroes bent to one knee, their cloaks brushing the rushes as they pledged forever. Loras was handsome enough to be any maiden's dream, with hair like spun gold and eyes the shimmering green of young leaves. Yet now that the dream had ripened into truth, she felt only the dry tremor of fear fluttering inside her ribs. A quiet knock at her door broke the hush. Before she could speak, Shay slipped in, brown eyes wide with concern. "My lady, the hour's late. You should sleep." "I tried." Sansa managed a brittle smile. "The city is awake. I feel every heartbeat of it." Shay crossed the room and drew a cloak around her shoulders. "Come away from the window. The knights here listen." They did. In King's Landing, whispers stalked every corridor like rats. But tomorrow's vows would bind House Stark to House Tyrell, as surely as chains. Soft silken chains promised to keep her safer than iron. Cersei had smiled a serpent smile, and called the match a balm to soothe northern tempers, though Sansa could feel the bitter aftertaste even now. Joffrey had laughed when he gave his blessing, a mocking titter like glass underfoot. Let the wolf maid wed the knight of flowers. Let her debt of loyalty bloom under Lannister rule. Yet it was the Queen of Thorns, old Lady Olenna, who had made the arrangement sing. A dragonfly of a woman, bones narrow and wings of wit beating ceaselessly. Olenna had wrapped her barbs in honeyed compliments until the small council agreed that the Stark girl's claim to Winterfell and the Tyrell hold on Highgarden could weave a tapestry strong enough to fence out winter itself. Sansa allowed Shay to lead her to the hearth. A few coals glimmered there, and the soft heat curled against her bare ankles. She said, "Sir Loras is kind." If Shay heard the tremor beneath the words, she gave no sign. Kind matters. Kind can grow. Grow. Ju Nimday. Sansa thought of lords and ladies sprouting like vines in the Reach's golden fields, of orchards heavy with fruit, of an endless summer the singers called the Tyrell fortune. She imagined herself beneath those warm skies, her skin freckling, her limbs unburdened by fear of Joffrey's whims or Queen Cersei's thin-lipped scrutiny. She would bear no crimson bruises, only sun kisses. Highgarden. Roses. Yet beyond the songs, she had seen Loras' eyes linger on Sir Robar Royce during the tourney at Bitterbridge. She knew the soft, sorrowful glances he cast toward a memory of Renly Baratheon, dead and cold beneath a shadow. She knew his courtesy could be armor as fine as the gilded steel he wore to war. In Highgarden's endless corridors, would he turn to her with warmth, or would he turn away, haunted by a lover's ghost? "I must be brave," she whispered, though she sounded small even to herself. Shay pressed a cup of spiced milk into her hands. "You are brave. Drink. Dawn comes swift." Dawn arrived on wings of rose-gold fire. Bells pealed across the city, and candles guttered as servants scurried in a hush of excitement. Septons donned embroidered stoles stitched with vines. Noble women in velvet gowns of emerald and gold fussed beneath canopies of wreathed myrtle. Lannister crimson flashed like blood among the petals, for Cersei would not have her own colors forgotten. In the Sept of Beeler the Blessed, the air was thick with the scent of lilies and the low hum of prayer. Sansa's fingers curled round a bouquet of red and white roses tied with a green ribbon. The colors of Highgarden, the colors of peace. Music drifted, flutes and high harps. She caught her reflection in a polished shield. Hair copper-rich, drawn into a fall of curls. Gown of watered silk, the pale blue of northern sky. Eyes like river ice. Her heart hammered against bone. Sir Loras waited before the altar in a doublet of pale green brocade, silver filigree picking out the 7-petaled rose. He looked every inch the storybook knight, yet there was a tiredness about his smile, a heaviness in his shoulders as though the past clung to him like chainmail. When she reached him, he bowed with exquisite grace and whispered, "My Lady Sansa, you look like spring reborn." "Sir," she murmured, hoping her cheeks did not betray her terror. The High Septon's voice rose, sonorous and deep, invoking the 7. Crystalline panes cast shafts of light across the marble floor, and in those prisms Sansa saw 1,000 shards of her future. Winterfell's halls lay broken and smoldering in distant memory, her siblings scattered like leaves in a storm. Here, in this shining place, perhaps new roots could take hold. She spoke her vows, lips trembling but clear. Loras repeated them in a voice steady as seasoned oak. When he bent to brush his lips against hers, his mouth was soft, courteous, fleeting. Applause rippled. Rose petals cascaded from the gallery. Joffrey clapped loudest, his grin sharp. Marguerite Tyrell watched with luminous composure. Her own path set to the Iron Throne through Joffrey's ring, and her eyes held Sansa's for a moment. Something like pity, something like resolve. They processed from the sept beneath an arch of sword points held aloft by Tyrell cousins. Outside, sunlight danced upon the river. The city roared its approval. Pennants snapped from ramparts, the golden rose entwined with a direwolf rampant, gray on white. For one heartbeat, Sansa felt the ghost of her father's hand upon her head, and heard his voice. "Be strong, little bird." Feasting filled the afternoon with clamor. Tables groaned under honeyed hams, silver trays of carved swan, and glazed apple tarts dusted with cinnamon. Musicians played sprightly reels as dervish dancers spun. Marguerite took her brother's arm and led him through the hall to greet their bannermen, leaving Sansa momentarily adrift amid smiling strangers in rich finery. She sipped hippocras, listening to stories of golden wheat yields and festivals crowned with mayflowers, tales that sounded like another world, far from the iron stink of the Red Keep. During the third course, Queen Olenna hobbled to Sansa's side, leaning on her carved stick like it was a weapon. "Child," she said sharply, "you'll find the Reach pleasant enough if you don't wilt. Do try not to wilt." Sansa lowered her gaze. "I shall do my best, my lady." Olenna's blue eyes missed little. The boy's gentle, though his heart still mourning poor Renly. "Give him patience and a quiet ear. Roses unfurl slowly when frosts linger." Her voice softened, almost kind. "And know this, in Highgarden we protect our own." Sansa clutched those words as if they were armor. Protect our own. Across the high table, Cersei watched her, wine cup poised like a dare. Gwyn's smile was thin. Perhaps Lannister claws still lurked beneath the rose leaves. But as the feast wore on, Sansa felt the grip of fear loosen, replaced by a fragile hope. Loras returned, eyes brighter now, and pressed his palm over hers. His thumb brushed her knuckles. "A garden awaits us," he said, and though the words were simple, they echoed like promise. They departed King's Landing on the third morning, their retinue a green and gold serpent winding south along the Roserad. Sansa rode a white palfrey gifted by Marguerite, its mane braided with ribbons. Loras led on a dappled stallion, armor packed away in favor of a linen riding cloak. The summer sun startled her with its warmth. She had grown accustomed to the smoke-laden haze of the city. Fields unfurled in gentle slopes, barley shimmering as though poured from cups of light, orchards heavy with peaches whose scent drifted in lazy swells. They made leisurely progress, stopping at minor keeps where Tyrell banners flew. Everywhere, Small folk emerged to scatter blossoms in their path. Yellow daisies, purple asters, red poppies that burst beneath hooves. Children sang rhymes of the rose knight and his winter bride. Sansa smiled and threw silver pennies to them, hearing their delighted squeals. At Maidenpool, they lodged with House Mouton. Loras lingered late in the godswood that night, kneeling beneath the weeping willow. Sansa approached quietly, the grass cool beneath her slippers. She watched him pray to the seven, then to the old gods as well, his lips moving silently. When he rose, his eyes glistened. "I asked them to watch over you," he said, voice husky. "Over us." She reached for his hand, and in that twilight, shade their fingers laced. A simple thing, yet stronger than silk. For the first time, she felt the faint bloom of trust. Days stretched into weeks. They crossed the Mander on a stone bridge veined with moss, and entered the heartland of the Reach. Highgarden rose before them at last, a dream in pale limestone and ivy-draped walls. Terraces spiraling downward toward an emerald valley where the honey wine curved like a glittering ribbon. Sansa stared, breath caught. Even Winterfell's great towers felt stark and grim beside this living maze of green. Bees hummed in the hedges, butterflies drifted, and the air, sweet, impossibly so, rich with jasmine, lilac, and the wild musk of earth after rain. Trumpets sounded. Gates opened. Stewards in rose livery knelt. Lady Olenna awaited on a balcony, flanked by Lord Mace Tyrell in a brocade doublet, bursting with embroidered fruit. Petyr Baelish hovered nearby, uninvited but ever present, a calculating smile curling his beard. Sansa shivered and turned away from Littlefinger's gaze. Inside, mirrored corridors unfolded into courtyards lush with fountains. 100 hidden paths beckoned. Maids ushered her to chambers overlooking a lotus pool, where white blossoms floated like sleepy swans. Servants drew a perfumed bath. Scented oils of lavender and bergamot eased road-weary limbs. When she emerged in a silk robe, Margaery waited with a tray of cheese and honeyed wine. "Welcome, sister." Margaery's grin was sunshine itself. "Highgarden is yours now. Come, let me show you the moonlit walk." They wandered a cloister of archways, lit by lanterns shaped like delicate blossoms. Vines glowed pale beneath flickering flames. Margaery spoke of festivals, spring masquerades, harvest balls, twilight picnics where poets recited sonnets until dawn. She spoke of Loras' childhood, of how he would sneak into the stables at midnight to braid ribbons into his pony's mane. She spoke of winters so mild the rivers never iced, of evenings so thick with crickets the air vibrated like harp strings. Sansa listened, each story weaving color into the gray void that had hollowed her since Ned's death. Finally, Margaery met her eyes. "Loras may be complicated, but he is loyal, and loyalty grows into love when nurtured." Sansa's throat tightened. "I will try." "Try together," Margaery said, and kissed her cheek. Married life began like the timid budding of early spring. Loras was meticulous in courtesy. He rose when she entered a room, poured her wine before his own, invited her counsel in hosting guests. At first their conversations were shallow. Weather, entertainments, the progress of the war in the Riverlands recounted by ravens, but gradually deeper currents stirred. One dusk in the perfumed hush of the summer hall, they studied a tapestry depicting Garth Greenhand sowing fields across the Reach. Candlelight flickered over the woven gold threads. "Garth promised abundance," Loras said. "Our house tries to honor that." Sansa traced a bloom upon the fabric. "My father taught that abundance is guarded by honor." Loras's expression softened. "Lord Eddard was a good man, by all accounts. I regret I never met him." She swallowed. "He would have liked you, I think. Today you spared Sir Bennis a whipping for dropping your shield in the tilt. Father believed Mercia Knight's finest blade." Loras chuckled. "If so, I have much to sharpen. Renly used to scold my pride." The memory slipped out, and for a heartbeat sorrow dimmed his eyes. But he did not turn away. Instead, he met her gaze squarely. "I loved him. I will not hide that." "I know," Sansa replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I will not ask you to." A hush settled between them, gentle as snowfall. Then Loras offered his arm. "Come walk the ramparts with me. The moonrise over the manor is worth 1,000 tapestries. They walked. Stars flared above, and the river below glimmered like molten silver. Loras spoke of tactics, how the Reach Knights might ride north one day to restore Winterfell alongside the wolf banners. Sansa spoke of her sister Arya, wild as wind, of Bran's dreams of ravens, of Rickon, small and fierce. She spoke of her mother, lost amid whispers of a red wedding. Grief twined with hope beneath the night sky, and when at last they returned to their chamber, their hands remained entwined. Their marriage bed had been courteous before, almost ceremonial, a gentleness edged with distance. That night, the distance lessened. Loras's touch was reverent, and when he kissed her brow afterwards, his whisper trembled. "Thank you for your trust." She felt tears prick her eyes, not of sorrow, but of fragile possibility. Autumn ripened. Ravens brought tidings of Robb Stark's successes in the west, of Stannis retreating to Dragonstone after defeat on the Blackwater, of Ironborn raids along the northern coast. The realm smoldered, yet here in Highgarden the war felt remote, like thunder rumbling beyond distant hills. Still, Sansa felt guilt coil within her each time she laughed in a sun-drenched courtyard, or tasted honeycakes dusted with powdered rose. She began to write letters, careful missives to Robb, to her mother if alive, to the lords of the Vale who might shelter Arya. Lord Varys had once told her that courtiers were spiders spinning silken strands. Now she spun her own, fine and secret. Lady Olenna noticed, of course. Over tea one morning, Olenna tapped the rim of her cup. "You correspond too quietly, child. The best webs catch both flies and eyes. Let the Lannisters see your quill scratched with pleasantries. Dull paper hides sharp purpose." Sansa blinked. "You would help me?" "Help?" Olenna sniffed. "I merely loathe lions gnawing on roses, bad for the garden." Her smile was a blade. "The North will need friends when snow falls. Plant seeds early." So Sansa planted seeds. She hosted harvest banquets where bannermen toasted the unity of wolf and rose. She sponsored a winter fair, inviting merchants from White Harbor to sell fur-lined cloaks and carved weirwood charms. Word spread of the northern lady who walked Highgarden's halls with quiet dignity and silver eyes that missed nothing. Loras watched her blossoming with pride untainted by jealousy, and in that fertile soil their bond rooted deeper. Yet shadows stirred. Pettier Baelish lingered in court, whispering in alcoves, his gaze measuring everything. He spoke often of the Eyrie, of how Lady Lysa mourned her nephew's plight, and would gladly harbor Sansa if the roses withered. When she smiled politely, Littlefinger's eyes glinted with unsaid promises. Loras placed himself at her shoulder whenever Baelish slithered near, and Lady Olenna once remarked, loud enough for half the court, that mockingbirds should mind their nests, lest roses grow thorns. Winter sent its first scouts in frosted mornings and breath-white evenings. On one such evening, a raven from King's Landing arrived. King Joffrey was dead, choked upon his wedding feast. Sansa's cup clattered from her hand. Shock and a bright, sinful relief warred within her, for the monster who haunted her nights was gone. But at what cost? Whispers followed swiftly. Tyrion Lannister accused, Sansa Stark suspected as accomplice. Cersei howled for justice. The city searched for the girl wolf vanished from the Red Keep. But Sansa was far away, beneath Tyrell banners that now rustled with uneasy winds. In a moonlit council chamber, Lord Mace wrung his hands. "The Queen demands our daughter-in-law's return for questioning. We cannot defy her openly." "We can, and we shall," Olenna snapped. "Let the lions roar. Highgarden feeds half this realm." Loras stood beside Sansa, shoulders squared. "She is my wife. She remains under my protection." "Nee." Sansa felt the weight of their choice settle upon her like chainmail cooled in snow. If she stayed, the Reach risked Lannister wrath. If she fled, she became a pawn in other hands. At last she spoke. "I will not run again. I will face their claims, but on grounds of honor. Let us send envoys to the capital. Demand fair trial under the faith." Olenna's brows lifted. Clever girl, cloaked the game in piety. Letters flew on raven wings. The High Septon agreed to preside over a trial at the Great Septi, shielded by Tyrell arms. Cersei raged, but Tommen Baratheon, small and pliable, acquiesced. When Sansa rode north toward the city once more, her escort numbered 500 Reach knights, rose banners snapping overhead. Loras rode at her side, armor gleaming. Crossing the Mander, she glanced back to Highgarden's distant towers, unsure she would see them again. But her heart steadied. She was not the frightened girl who had once trembled under Cersei's gaze. She was Lady Sansa Tyrell of Winterfell and Highgarden. Wolf and rose entwined, and the winds of winter would bend to her blooming. The march to King's Landing was slower this time, heavy with foreboding. Yet at every village children gathered to watch the rose banners pass, and women offered garlands of late autumn blooms, sunset daisies, and crimson mums. Sansa accepted each with gratitude, weaving them into her horse's mane. The simple act warmed her, a reminder of lives untouched by court intrigue, lives that would suffer if lords failed their duty. One misty morning near Bitterbridge, scouts reported a troop of gold-cloaked riders shadowing their column. Loras donned his helm and ordered defensive ranks. Sansa stood upon a rise, her cloak whipping, as a single rider approached under flag of truce. It was Sir Jaime Lannister. He removed his helm, golden hair dulled by damp. "Lady Sansa," he called, voice carrying. "The crown offers safe conduct if you surrender yourself for royal inquiry." Loras's destrier clattered forward. "Inquiry? You mean your sister's vengeance?" "Perhaps both," Jaime admitted. His gaze flicked to Sansa. "I do not relish delivering a girl to the dungeons." Sansa's reply was clear, carrying across the hush. "I will answer before the faith, not the lion's den. Tell your queen the Reach stands witness." "Vinarpawol." Jaime's jaw tightened. "Then may the gods decide." He turned his horse and rode. That night, fires burned bright against the fog. Sansa lay within her tent, listening to the creak of armor outside. Loras entered quietly, unbuckling his sword. "Did I err?" she asked. He sat beside her. Rain pattered the canvas. "You spoke with courage. The seven favor the brave." She reached for his hand and he squeezed softly. It struck her then that despite all shadows, she was not alone. King's Landing loomed at last, sullen under iron skies. Its gates opened to admit them, begrudgingly, for Sir Garland and Sir Willis had ridden ahead with letters bearing the High Septon's seal. The streets whispered as they passed. "Traitor," "Queenslayer," "Rose Wolf." Sansa kept her eyes forward, posture regal. Within the Red Keep, Cersei awaited in black velvet, eyes red-rimmed bright with fury. "You bring an army to my throne," she hissed, voice low. Loras bowed. "We bring witness to our queen's innocence, your grace. The High Septon insists all accusations be weighed publicly." Cersei's glare could have melted iron. "We shall see who melts." The trial was set for the morrow beneath the colored glass of the Great Septide. Crowds gathered like storm clouds. Tyrell knights lined one side of the nave, gold cloaks the other. The High Septon intoned the charges as incense swirled. Regicide, conspiracy, collusion with Tyrion Lannister, now fugitive. Sansa stood tall, hands clasped, dress of snowy wool trimmed in subtle vines. Cersei's testimonies dripped with venom. She painted Sansa as serpent, seducing first Joffrey's heart and then his killers. But under questioning, her tales frayed, contradictions glaring beneath the sept-high chandeliers. Witnesses from the feast spoke of a cup changed hands, a fool named Dantos vanished, a necklace of black amethysts shattered. Yet none could place Sansa at the poison. Then Lady Olenna stepped forward, leaning on her stick. Her voice, tremulous yet sharp, cut through the murmurs. She praised Sansa's virtue, told of her months in Highgarden, of letters filled with hopes for peace. "A girl who tends to orphan orchards and winter fairs does not brew death," she said, eyes narrowing at the queen. Finally, Sir Jaime reluctantly confirmed he had seen Sansa only once after the feast, fleeing in fear with dwarf guards pursuing. "I saw no malice in her flight," he said. The High Septon conferred with Septons of the most devout. The crowd held its breath. At sunset's fall, the verdict rang. Unproven. Sansa Stark Tyrell was free under the Seven's mercy. A roar like surf broke across the Sept, from Tyrell men, from small folk tired of lion rule. Cersei's scream of outrage was lost in the thunder. Sansa exhaled, knees trembling. Loras caught her as her strength faltered, lifting her into his arms before the realm. Petals, white petals this time, rained from unseen hands in the upper balconies, cascading in pale torrents that mingled with the golden light slanting through stained glass. In that moment she felt light enough to rise upon the breeze. Victory bred peril. Though absolved, Sansa sensed the Red Keep bristling. Spies crept, daggers gleamed. But Tyrell's steel stood firm. Lord Mace installed a garrison within Maegor's holdfast. Sir Garland patrolled Blackwater Bay with swift warships. Lady Olenna sowed rumors that the Iron Bank favored rose debts over lion debts. Coffers could close at whim. Behind closed doors, Sansa met secretly with Prince Oberyn Martell, newly arrived for the trial. The Red Viper's dark eyes danced. "A wolf rose intrigues me. The North suffers. Dorne remembers injustice. Perhaps our thorns align." She answered with cautious hope. Alliances could turn tides. Yet, despite politics, her marriage grew roots. In the quiet of the Maiden Vault, she and Loras spoke of childhood dreams. He confessed nightmares of shadow assassins. She confessed aching homesickness for snow. Together they planned a visit to the winter town once the war's fires cooled, to plant the first Reach roses in northern soil. He taught her to ride faster, spearing rings on a tilt-yard post. She showed him how to skin an apple in a single curling strip, a trick Bran had loved. Laughter became ritual, small and sacred. When winter's first true storm swept the city, they stood atop the Tower of the Hand, cloaks flapping as snowflakes swirled. Sansa caught a flake on her glove. "In Winterfell, snow mutes every sound," she whispered. "Perhaps one day," Loras said, brushing a flake from her cheek. "Our children will hear that hush." "Children? Die?" The word stunned her with its sweetness and terror. She turned, meeting his gaze. The vulnerability there, the earnest wish. She nodded once, sure now that even thorn-marked paths could lead to bloom. But far to the north, beyond Moat Cailin, the wind howled through tumbled keeps. The Boltons still held Winterfell, flaying banners cracking in white storms. Rumors reached King's Landing of a new dread. Ramsay Snow called himself Bolton now, seeking a Stark bride to claim legitimacy. When word of Sansa's marriage reached his ears, rage seethed like boiling pitch. He sent ravens south, curses, threats, promises of retribution. One letter arrived at Highgarden, the parchment stiff with dried blood. Loras burned it to ash, eyes narrowed. "Winterfell must be freed," Sansa said, voice steady. "And it shall," Loras vowed. "I will ride beside your brother. We will tear the flayed man down." Plans unfurled. Tyrell levies to march when spring eased roads. Treaties with the Vale and River Lords. Secret riders to White Harbor. Pettier Baelish smiled thinly, sensing tides turn beyond his control. Cersei, cornered by debts and dwindling allies, plotted desperate moves, but Tommen's gentle rule favored mercy over wrath. Amid brewing storms, Sansa wrote again to Robb. "I come not as captive, but as sister, united with friends. The Reach stands ready. The North remembers." The last night before the army's departure, she and Loras walked the long gallery where moonlight fell through carved windows in stripes of pale fire. They stopped before a suit of ancestral armor, gilt chasings forming a rose upon the breastplate. Loras lifted the helm. "My grandfather's. He died at Ashford defending a Targaryen prince. Honor runs in the metal." He knelt and set the helm at her feet. "And now I swear, I will stand before you against any storm. I may falter, but I will not fail." She touched his face, drawing him up. "We stand together." In their chamber, they undressed slowly. no longer strangers. Candlelight traced scars on his shoulder, tourney wounds, battle wounds, heart wounds. She kissed each. He pressed lips to the faded bruise above her hip, relic of Joffrey's cruelty long since healed. They found solace in shared gentleness, weaving hope beneath linen sheets while the city slept. Outside, the Blackwater glimmered. Ships creaked, banners stirred, and in the silent spaces between heartbeats, history shifted, quiet yet inexorable. Morning broke, chill and bright. Sansa watched from the parapet as columns of spearmen and knights filed through the Lion Gate, banners streaming. The Golden Rose, the direwolf of the North, the crescent moon of House Arryn. Unexpected yet welcome, for Lord Nestor had sent 50 knights in bronze-rimmed plate. Trumpets called. Hooves thundered. Snowflakes drifted, but soldiers laughed, hearts kindled by purpose. Atop the tallest mast of the flagship Riverwind, a new standard fluttered. A rose entwined with a wolf, the sigil of House Stark Tyrell, freshly stitched the night before by Sansa's own hand. Loras had traced the threads with awe. She pressed gloved hands to the cold stone now, watching that banner shrink as the fleet turned upriver toward the open sea. Somewhere below, Petyr Baelish murmured to himself, plans unraveling. Lady Olenna watched too, expression unreadable. Sansa whispered into the wind, "Father, guide him true." Then louder, to herself as much as to the gods, "Guide us all." The first real snow of the season began to fall, cloaking rooftops in white. Sansa breathed deep. The air tasted like Winterfell. She turned from the wall, skirts swirling, and strode toward the council chamber. There were letters to write, larders to fill for refugees, ravens to White Harbor. A realm did not mend itself with swords alone. It needed steady hands, patient hearts, and the promise of spring. And somewhere beyond the falling snow, in fields yet unseen, roses would bloom crimson against the white, their roots sunk deep, unshaken by storm. Kami. En. Winter's breath swept through the city like a pale tide, creeping beneath lintels and around Merlin towers. Frost-edged window panes of the Red Keep, lacing them with delicate white veins that glimmered in candlelight. In the small hours, when even the bells rested and ravens tucked their beaks beneath wing, Sansa Stark Tyrell sat awake in the Queen's solar, quill scratching quietly across parchment. A single brazier threw a wavering halo about her. Behind her, the glassy black of night held reflected flames like scattered embers set adrift. She was drafting 3 letters at once. The first, addressed to Lord Wyman Manderley, spoke of trade convoys and mutual aid. The Reach possessed grain and saffron, the North iron and timber. The second, to Lady Anya Waynwood, invoked old oaths of the Eyrie and new hopes for the realm's renewal. The third, more secret, was intended for Nymeria Sand of Dorne, delicately probing Prince Oberyn's half-spoken notion of a Dornish alliance against common enemies. Each line weighed risk versus reward, each word balanced like a blade on ice. Shay dozed on a settle near the door, her head bobbing with every dip of the quill. Sansa paused, flexed stiff fingers, then sealed the letters with wax impressed by the new sigil of wolf-entwined rose. She blew gently until the crimson pools cooled to glossy mirrors. Dawn's first gray hints pushed at the shutters. Soon the fortress would stir. Footsteps of stewards, clank of armor, clash of practice blades in the yard. But for this thin slice of silence, she belonged to herself. She rose, swirled a fur-lined mantle round her shoulders, and stepped onto the veranda. Far below, the Blackwater lay half-shrouded in mist. Beyond it the war camp spread like a dark quilt, each banner a patch. Tyrell roses, Stark direwolves, Baratheon stags of Renly's loyal remnants, Arryn moons, and smaller sigils. A griffin of Connington exiles, the pine of House Corbray, the silver trout of Rivermen, who had slipped south since the Red Wedding's rumors had turned raw and roaring in men's guts. Torches winked in those camps like low stars. Somewhere out there, Loras drilled his cavalry at false dawn, determined to harden Green Reach riders before they faced the pale horrors whispered to haunt the Dreadfort's kennels. Sansa imagined him wheeling through morning fog, sword glinting. A tremor of pride warmed her. She thought of the letter she dared not write. to Ramsay Bolton himself, offering him surrender terms of clemency in exchange for Winterfell's peaceful handover. The very notion tasted of ash. No, only steel and flame could scour that stain. Footsteps approached. A cloak rustled behind her where Shay should have been sleeping. Sansa turned to find Ser Balon Swan. White cloak clasped at shoulder, face grave. "My lady," he said, voice low enough not to carry. "Cersei Lannister requests your presence at first light. She has summoned the small council." Summoned, not invited. Even with Tommen crowned, the Dowager Queen moved the levers of power. Yet every lever creaked now, counterweighted by Tyrell gold and the Faith's stern gaze. Sansa nodded. "I will come." Balon hesitated. "Take care, my lady. The Queen's grief waxes fierce by night, and fiercer still at dawn." "I will meet fierceness with courtesy," Sansa replied, though a cold knot coiled beneath her ribs. Cersei's chambers reeked of myrrh and camphor, as though she hoped to mask her rage beneath incense. Thin daylight bled through gauzy curtains. The Queen stood rigid at the window, wine cup clamped in pale fingers. Around the table waited Grand Maester Gormon Tyrell, pale cousin to Mace, plucked hastily to replace Pycelle. Lord Baelish, Lord Qyburn Lack, and Sir Kevan Lannister with jaw set stonily. Cersei's green eyes fixed on Sansa. Gore. "You ride north this fortnight, do you not?" Sansa inclined her head. "Once the host musters, your grace." "Then hear me plainly." Cersei's nails tapped glass. "You will persuade your brother to bend the knee to Tommen, or the crown will name him traitor anew. The north is broken. Best it mend itself under wise rule, not more rebellion." Grand Maester Gormon coughed, glancing at Sansa Tiente. "With respect, your grace, the Reach has pledged succor." "The Reach feeds itself first," Cersei snapped. She stalked across the rug, skirts swishing like angry waves. "Do not feign charity. You sniff the roses because you planted them. But lions still possess claws." "Narwan." Petyr Baelish lifted a polite brow. Perhaps compromise could serve all. A regency council, Stark, Tyrell Lannister, sharing guardianship of the young king and his realm until peace. Enough. Cersei's cup slammed down, red spilling. "I will hear no more talk of councils dividing my son's birthright." Sansa felt every gaze shift to her. She kept her voice calm. "Your grace, my brother seeks only justice for atrocities committed by the Boltons. He has no quarrel with the Iron Throne, while Tommen rules justly. And yet he remains uncrowned in Winterfell with northern swords at his beck." Cersei hissed. "He remains in the field, far from Winterfell." Sansa corrected gently. "That castle is defiled by flayed banners. If royal forces aided us in retaking it, his grace would earn the North's undying loyalty." A dangerous silence settled. Qyburn's thin smile crept like shadow. Kevan studied maps on the table, pretending not to watch Cersei's temper fuse burn. Baelish's eyes glittered, calculating. Cersei's voice softened, deadly cold. "You would have me send men, my men, to die on northern ice while you, Wolf Rose, return to far-off gardens?" "I ride north as well," Sansa said. "I have asked the High Septon to bless our host at Moat Cailin before we march. The Faith will witness whose cause is just." Mention of the Faith pulled Cersei up short. The last trial had bruised her pride deeply. She pressed lips thin. "Go then, chase ghosts and rebels. But understand, the Iron Throne will not forever brook insolence." Her gaze flicked to Baelish. "Lord Petyr, escort Lady Sansa from my sight." The corridor outside echoed with their footsteps. Petyr moved with feline grace, hands clasped behind back. "A masterful parry, my lady." She wished to cut, you slipped aside. His smile slanted conspiratorial. "You grow formidable." "You taught me caution," she replied, though colder than he might hope. "The game grows sharper daily." He leaned closer. "Should you tire of roses and snow, remember the Eyrie stands ever ready to shelter Ned Stark's daughter." "I remember." She quickened pace. If he felt the dismissal, he masked it with a polite bow before turning down a side stair. Shay waited at chamber doors, worry clouding her brow. Sansa ordered hot tea, then sat to reread her earlier letters. She added a postscript to Manderley. The Crown's tolerance thins. Prepare White Harbor for siege or succor. She sealed it anew. 2 days later, the host marched. The Rosarwad to war. Cold sun glinted upon helms, as 30,000 men flowed from King's Landing's gates. A river of steel headed north. At its vanguard rode Loras Tyrell clad in new forged plate, chased with delicate roses wrought of red gold. To his left trotted Brienne of Tarth, summoned south at Sansa's request, and now bearing a wolf and rose cloak, as sworn shield to the Stark Tyrell household. Behind them drummed heavy hooves of the Reach cavalry. Behind those, columns of Stark spearmen and mismatched mail. A corps of Robb's survivors reinforced by fresh levies, smuggled through the neck by Crannogman. Sansa traveled midway among the baggage wagons, her litter plain save for small dyed pennants marking her rank. She had refused a gilded coach. Let no soldier believe she rode cushioned while they plodded through mire. She spent hours each day on horseback beside Loras, learning the subtleties of command, how forage parties moved, that pace of a host depended on the slowest axle, that scouts must ride in depth like layered nets. At Maidenpool they paused to refit shoes and to gather fresh oats. There, an envoy of black robes awaited. Maester Aemon of the Wall, bent but bright-eyed, escorted by brothers of the Night's Watch. Sansa welcomed him into her tent where lanterns cast mellow light upon maps. "Winter gathers," Aemon rasped, voice thin as vellum. "The realm feuds, while dead things walk. You go north to settle mortal scores, yet north of all, the true war stirs." Sansa listened to tales of white shadows and blue eyes gleaming beyond the gift. She felt ice crawl her spine. How fares Castle Black? Thin of men. Aemon sighed. Lord Commander Mormont is gone. A new Lord Commander must rise, or the wall will fall. Loras glanced at Sansa. "We cannot march farther than Winterfell, but perhaps supplies. Steel and food help," Aemon agreed. "Yet hearts help more. A united realm, not riven. Win your castle swiftly, if you can." "Nepika." Sansa knelt before him. "I will send what aid lies within my power, Maester. And my prayers, though they weigh little against the cold." His blind eyes glistened. Words may yet light fires. That night, she wrote to the Lords of the Reach, urging them to dispatch seasoned archers to Eastwatch by sea. She penned a second letter to Davos Seaworth, wherever he might be, asking if Stannis still dreamed of duty. The Night's Watch could use such dreamers now. She sealed both with black ribbon. The Rosara bent west to avoid flooded flats. Fog clung low, muffling clatter. At dusk on the 10th day, outriders returned breathless. A Lannister host was shadowing them along a ridge, 2,000 spears under Ciradam Marbrand. Loras called a council amid dripping willows by a stream. Maps spread, torches guttered in damp air. Garland and Willis Tyrell, both arrived from Highgarden with fresh companies, argued for swift engagement to cow the lions. Sir Brynden Tully, freed from a Lannister cell in a quiet exchange brokered by Margaery, counseled caution. Marbrand might wish only to harry, not entangle. Sansa observed, quiet. Finally she spoke. Sir Adam was known for honor before war soured bonds. Perhaps his sword seeks purpose beyond lion's pay. Send envoys. It was daring to trust. But time weighed heavy. Loras consented. At dawn, Brienne trotted out beneath Parley banner. Hours crawled. By noon she returned with Marbrand himself. The red-haired knight dismounted, helm under arm, and knelt before Sansa's standard. "I have no taste for fighting wolves, nor roses," he declared, voice steady. "My oath was to protect the realm. I beg passage east. My men will take ship for the wall, to face enemies all men share." Sansa's heart kicked. She glanced at Loras, who nodded. "Go with our blessing," she said. "And may the Seven watch over you in the far north." Thus 2,000 lions turned watchmen, and the host pressed on lighter in spirit. At Duskendale, ravens met them bearing grim news. Robb Stark slain at the Twins, his mother butchered alongside him. The Red Wedding. The army shuddered as if struck. Men wept in silence, others cursed Frey treachery until throats bled. Sansa felt the world tilt. Shay caught her before she fell. The tent grew small, airless, as grief clamped like iron round her chest. Robb, golden brother, crowned in direwolf glory, gone. Loras knelt, arms about her, but the tears would not come at first. She lay still, frozen beyond weeping. Outside, torchlight swayed and the camp murmured. Eventually, rage thawed numbness. A hot torrent, scalding. Her hands clawed at blankets. They slaughtered him under guest right. They will answer, Loras whispered. Brienne stood sentinel at the flap, eyes like blue steel. If you command it, my lady, I will carve path to the twins alone. Even in anguish, Sansa steadied herself. Not yet. The Boltons must fall first, else the North remains lost. My brother deserves his home avenged. Through the night she worked, drafting proclamation that no Frey nor Bolton would know quarter, until they knelt for justice before the gods. She sealed it with wax black as mourning. In morning assembly she spoke to the host, voice ringing across frosted camp. Robb Stark is dead, yet the North lives within us. We march not for conquest, but for rightful peace. We march for children flayed, for families sundered, for vows stained red. Winterfell will rise again, a beacon against darkness beyond the wall. If you would stand idle, ride south. If you would stand tall, follow me. Her words, clear and fierce, swept the ranks like fire across dry wheat. A roar answered, swords lifted, shields hammered, and grief turned to resolve. They crossed the neck, under lowering skies. Cranagman guided them through secret causeways, reeds whispering around hidden palisades. Howland Reed himself emerged, gray-bearded and watchful. He knelt to Sansa, calling her the keen rose of winter. In his lodge, she met small gray-eyed daughter Mira, proud despite grief for fallen king. Jojen's empty place at the hearth told its own tale. He had followed Bran beyond the wall months past. Reed swore bog men to her cause and gifted jars of poisoned frog spears for silent raids. He spoke of Bolton patrols growing bold, of northern hearts hungry for rebellion, and he told of monstrous hounds prowling around Winterfell, their howls echoing night after night. Sansa slept little. Dreams came. Bran gazing through a white weirwood face, Arya leaping across stone rooftops, Jon wrapped in black cloaks beneath walls of ancient ice. She woke before dawn, mind stinging with urgency. Each sunrise seemed to shorten the road and lengthen the list of unknown fates. Moat Caelan's broken towers rose from swamp like jagged teeth. Ironborn under Victarion Greyjoy held them, their black ships throttling the neck. A siege could cost weeks they could ill afford. Reed proposed trickery. Garland suggested assault. Loras studied the causeway, jaw tight. Sansa watched morning fog swirl and remembered tales of Theon Greyjoy's betrayal. She had once prayed for his pain. Now she needed his people removed. She turned to Willis, strategist, calm, and asked, "Can your engineers fell towers into the bog, collapse their walls inward, seal the causeway?" "With patience," he said. "Why?" "Because then the Ironborn cannot flee," she replied. "Offer them honorable surrender. Ships to sail home if they abandon the fort. If they refuse, we drown them." Reed's eyes glinted approvingly. A parley flag went up. The Ironborn captain, scarred and swaggering, cursed them as lily-soaked Southrons. But news of Euron's growing madness and Balon's death had eroded their zeal. Faced with ruinous entombment, they accepted terms. The castle for safe passage. As they marched away along paths south of the bog, Sansa felt no triumph, only pragmatic relief. One obstacle gone. Past the moat, the north opened wide. Gray fields, wind-ripped heaths, scattered holds scarred by Bolton raids. Villagers fled to the host like streams joining river, bearing tales of Winterfell's desecration. Flayed bodies hung from ramparts, weirwood hacked to a stump, wolves' heads spiked while dogs feasted below. Sansa listened until bile scorched her throat. Scouts struck first at the Dreadfortian outriders. Silent arrows in forest shadows, blades glinting beneath aurora. Each Bolton banner captured was burned. Prisoners offered chance to forswear their flayed lord and stand with the wolf rose. Many, fearful, did. Those who refused met Reed's poisoned spears. Snow thickened, drifts cresting knee. Supply wagons bogged. Men cursed the cold. Yet Tyrell grain kept bellies full, and Stark songs warmed nights by the campfires. Deep-voiced dirges melding with lilting reach ballads until a strange harmony formed, half summer, half winter. Sansa walked those fires, cloak trimmed in frostfox, listening. She knelt beside wounded boys, pressing hands to fevered brows. She praised a baker who stretched flour with acorn meal, a smith who mended shoes from broken cuirasses. In doing so, she learned the texture of her realm, rough and raw and worth every drop of winter sun. Loras watched her, admiration kindling. One night, alone in her tent, he laid a carved oak box in her hands. Inside, 2 small silver cuffs engraved with entwined thorns and runes of the old gods. "When the day comes," he said, voice hushed, "these belong on the wrists of our children. May they carry both faiths, both lands." Tears blurred her gaze. She kissed him, lingering, the north wind rattling canvas around them. At last, the towers of Winterfell loomed through swirling snow, stark shapes against leaden sky. Smoke rose from within, not comforting hearth smoke, but acrid black. Sansa's breath caught. Memories tumbled. Arya chasing cats, Bran racing along walls, father standing on battlements with cloak stirring. She dismounted slowly, palm pressed cold stone of an outwork abandoned in previous siege. "I'm home," she whispered, voice cracking. The host arrayed upon the King's Road. Bolton banners snapped atop walls, pink flayed men on russet field. Ramsay's hounds bayed. On the ramparts, pale-eyed soldiers jeered. Loras convened final council in a ruined granary lit by torches. Snow seeped through holes in roof. Brynden Tully traced battle lines in soot on table. Garland would lead cataphracts on east flank, feinting near the Hunter's Gate. Reed's bogmen would infiltrate through postern sluice, once used for waste runoff. Stark spears would storm the collapsed south wall. Breach left from Greyjoys burning. Sansa stood aside, itching with dread. "He will keep hostages," she murmured to Brienne. "He will use innocents." Brienne's blue eyes hardened. "We will reach them." She sought Loras before dawn. The world lay hushed under blanket of new snow. Sky pale pearl. "Bring him to me alive if you can," she said. "He must stand before the north." "I will try," Loras promised. Though his eyes spoke of blood, they clasped forearms in farewell. Battle broke like a thunderclap at sunrise. Tyrell horns blared. Reach lancers pounded across icy meadow. Hooves crunching. Arrows rained from walls. Shields splintered. Catapults hidden in tree line rocked boulders that smashed crenels. On south front, stark war cries rose. The north remembers, as men surged through charred gap, ladders scraping stone. Sansa watched from a command ridge, flanked by Brienne and Willis. Snow whipped sideways, mixing with ash. She saw Loras at East Gate, leading charge. Green cloak against white, sword dripping scarlet comet as he carved path. A huge armored mastiff leapt. His blade slashed, dog fell yelping. Ramsay's men fought vicious, arrows tipped with black poison, but Tyrell knights outclassed them. Reed's slim forms slithered through sluice, emerging within Bailey to open Sally Port. From vantage, Sansa glimpsed it swing wide. Direwolf banners poured through like river freed. Horn call echoed thrice. Agreed signal. She allowed breath to slip. Inside the walls now. Hours ground. White sun climbed. Smoke-smeared sky bruised purple. At last a Tyrell pennon unfurled atop First Keep. Cheers rippled among watching levies. Brienne gripped Sansa's elbow. "It is won." Sansa's knees wobbled. But fight yet raged near the Godswood. She mounted and rode, cloak streaming, heart hammering. Within broken shell of Winterfell, snow lay crimson-veined. Bodies sprawled. Bolton flayers, Reach squires, Stark bannermen intertwined in death's embrace. Sansa dismounted at gate of Godswood. She pushed inside. The weirwood, hacked months before, stood now as a scarred trunk, but its face, half shorn, still wept red sap. Beneath it Loras knelt, sword pressed to Ramsay Bolton's throat. Ramsay's lips bled. His eyes burned with a mad, keen light. "My lady," Loras said without turning. "The cur surrenders." Sansa stepped forward, snow crunching under boot. She regarded Ramsay. He leered despite blood on teeth. "Pretty wolf rose," he hissed. "Come to pluck. Flaying ends today," she said softly. Ramsay laughed, guttural. "Nothing ends. Flesh splits, bone shatters, dogs dine. Always has. Always will." Loras's grip tightened. Silence. Ramsay's gaze darted to Weirwood. "Even your gods bleed, girl." He spat red upon root. Something inside Sansa snapped. Not like brittle timber, but like ice warmer water can crack with a thunderclap. She lifted her chin. "Sir Loras, bind him." Leather cords bit into Bolton wrists. Brienne fetched irons. Ramsay laughed still, but nervous now, giggling too high. When they hauled him toward the great hall, roofless, gutted, surviving Northmen lined path. Some spat, some cursed, but at Sansa's raised hand they held. Vengeance would come by law, not riot. In the hall's shattered heart, she convened a tribunal as dusk purpled sky. Reed represented the neck. Manderley had arrived by swift horse to stand for White Harbor. Lady Barbary Dustin rode for Barrowlands, and Garland Tyrell for the Reach. They sat on makeshift benches of timber beams. Sansa addressed them, voice ringing against stone. "Ramsay Bolton stands accused of treason, kinslaying, violation of guest right, and flaying of free Northfolk. We sit in judgment under the sight of old gods and new." Ramsay's smirk faltered when Manderley read list of atrocities. Children skinned for sport, women hunted like hares, Theon Greyjoy. His thrall, mutilated beyond healing. Ramsay's laughter dwindled to sullen mutters. When Reed rose last, he spoke of honor. "In the neck we bury our dead whole, so they may stand in the water halls." This one robbed souls of that peace. He turned green eyes on Sansa. "Justice must be swift, else ghosts linger." They voted, unanimous. Sentence: death by wolf's law. Not flaying, not dogs. Ain blade. Sansa looked into Ramsay's eyes, hollow pits now. "You took my brother's home," she said, calm as snowfall. "You will not take his memory." Loras offered her his sword, but she shook head. She would not soil Robb's teachings with blood. Instead, she nodded to Brienne. The tall knight swung her longsword, one stroke sure. Ramsay's body toppled. Silence settled, deep. Snowflakes began to fall again. Soft, gentle, unstained. They caught in Sansa's hair. She closed eyes. Somewhere a child started singing the lullaby of Winterfell. Gentle words drifting among ruin, weaving hope. The days following were a whirl of labor. Fires burned corpse piles outside walls. Carpenters erected new roofs. Masons patched breaches. Reed's crannogmen felled pines from Wolf's Wood to shore gatehouses. Tyrell quartermasters opened wagons of seed and grain. Bakers lit ovens never meant to cool again. Sansa walked each project, praising, guiding. In crypts beneath castle, she descended with maesters and Brienne, torches flickering off stone kings. They found Ned Stark's tomb undisturbed, not by grace of Bolton's, but their own superstition. She knelt, pressing fingers to cold gray stone, tears slipping at last. "I have come home, father. Forgive my slowness." Loras waited at stair-top, silent sentinel. Spring whispered at edges of winter's grip. By mid-month, saplings of weirwood shipped from the Isle of Faces arrived. Gifts from green men who seldom meddled, yet this cause touched roots older than man. They planted one where the old trunk stood. Sansa scattered ash of flayed banners at its base as fertilizer. Reed chanted words in the old tongue. Gorman Tyrell murmured sevenfold blessings. The wind sighed through ruined ramparts like a benediction. One morning Manderley brought news. Stannis Baratheon had broken siege of Eastwatch. riding hard from Skagos with wildling spears at his back, and Sir Adam Marbrand's lions at his front. The other seekers fled north of the Frostfangs. The wall held, for now. Sansa sat by new-bud leaves of her weirwood and pondered. War perhaps not won, but the realm stirred toward unity. She drafted proclamation of northern fealty to King Tommen conditional on royal justice, served to Freys and Lannisters complicit in Red Wedding. She sealed it Direwolf Rose and dispatched ravens. Then she turned to tasks of governance. She named Wyman Manderley Lord Regent of White Harbor, reinstated House Serwyn to their holdings, granted Reed's Crannogmen right to untaxed passage through rebuilt causeways, offered lands to Tyrell knights who wished to remain, few accepted, but those who did mingled bloodlines with northern maids, sowing future ties. Loras remained at her side, though southern sunshine called him. Together they paced battlements at twilight, looking over sprawl of camps now turning to hamlets beneath protective walls. "Will you miss your roses?" she asked one evening, breath-fogging air. "My roses are here," he answered, brushing snowflake from her hair. He drew a folded parchment, thumb rubbing wax-off seal. Margaery's hand written in graceful loops. She and Tommen prepared progress to Winterfell come true spring, bringing wagon loads of saplings and bees to cross-pollinate the north. Sansa smiled. Honey would be welcome in austere land. Later, in quiet of their solar, she told Loras she might be with child. Moon-blood overdue, dreams vivid with the scent of summer fields. He held her gently, eyes shimmering hope. "A bud in winter," he whispered. Late snow fell one dawn, lazy and soft, clinging to budding weirwood leaves like pearls. Sansa stood at parapet of tallest tower, watching banners flap. The wolf rose side by side with ancient direwolf alone. A hush lay over courtyard where workers ceased to marvel at snow. Now they simply worked on. Winterfell lived again, albeit wounded. She rested gloved hand upon slight swell beneath firs. Far south, the Lion Queen scowled, and beyond seas Daenerys Targaryen marshaled dragons, and north of north dead things gathered. But in this hour she allowed herself the smallest measure of peace. Children's laughter pealed from courtyard as Reed's kin taught Tyrell squires to skate on frozen cistern. Loras joined her, cloak whipping. "Storm's easing," he said. "Scouts report umber banners approaching from last hearth. They come to bend knee. Nan Termor." Sansa nodded, watching clouds part to reveal slice of blue. She recalled stories old Nan once spun. Of spring that arrived even after the long night, when warm winds melted fear. Perhaps such a spring could come again, if they nurtured roots carefully, pruned cruelty, watered with justice. She turned to him, snowflakes caught in auburn lashes. "Then let us greet them. We have a dream to share, a dream of gardens blooming beyond the wall of winter." Ned 10. Hand in hand they descended stone steps, footsteps echoing. Two figures walking a path neither could have foreseen. A wolf of the snows and a knight of the roses, forging something new where ice met bloom. And far above, the pale sun climbed, diffusing through lifting cloud, as if determined, despite all that was broken, to shine. "Oh, Daddy." The ravens came before sunrise, wings black against the paling east, and their arrival set the newly mended courtyards of Winterfell humming. Sansa woke to soft tapping at the shutters. When she pulled them wide, she saw Maester Luwin's old rookery alive with activity once more. Chains rattling as ravens hopped impatiently along perches polished by years of claw and feather. The chill air carried their croaks across the still-sleeping castle like staccato drumbeats. Somewhere below, the forge fires were already glowing, dim pinpricks of orange in the blue-gray dusk, and the smell of hot iron mixed with pine smoke drifted upward to her chamber window. She dressed quickly in layered wool, dyed the pale green of new shoots, trimmed with velvet so dark it verged on black. Shay laced the bodice, fingers deft. Their eyes met in the mirror, and for a heartbeat they were only two women bracing for the days unknown. Down in the great keep's corridors, each torch she passed seemed to crackle with fresh tension, as if they felt the change born on raven wings. By the time she reached the council chamber, Sansa had arranged her face into calm authority, but her pulse still raced. Loras was already there, helm on the table, hair damp from the fast ride back from dawn drills. He smiled, the quick wry twist she had come to know, but his eyes showed lines of worry. Beside him sat Lord Wyman Manderley, breathing audibly through his beard, fingers worrying a carved whalebone clasp. Howland Reed stood lean and silent near the far hearth, where flames cast dancing shadows on the maps spread across oak boards newly planed. Loras Tyrell poured mulled wine into wooden cups, scent of clove and apple filling the room. At the head of the table, Brienne of Tarth unrolled a fresh parchment. "From the Eyrie," she announced, voice deep, signed by Lady Lysa Arryn and Sir Brynden Tully in equal hand. Sansa took the letter, scanning each neat line. The Vale had at last chosen its path. 6,000 knights and twice that number of levies marched under the Moon and Falcon, Lord Nestor Royce commanding. They rode to join Sansa's banners at Winterfell before the first full thaw. The timid Lord's declarant had yielded to rousing speeches from young Robert Arryn, coached doubtless by Petyr Baelish, and to rumors of white shadows gathering in the high passes. The letter pledged oats, salt pork, and iron-shod hooves for the road beyond the neck. "We answer the Wolf Rose," Lysa wrote, "for winter's howl threatens us all." Sansa lowered the page. "The Knights of the Vale will pass Maidenpool within a fortnight," she said. "They must cross the Trident, then the King's Road. We'll send riders to guide them through the neck before the bogs break up." "Necessaire." Howland Reed gave a curt nod. "The causeways can bear weight if they keep single file. I will have my people mark safe footing." Loras traced a gauntleted finger along the map, calculating distances. "If Royce keeps pace, they reach us on the new moon. Enough time to quarter them before Lady Margaery and King Tommen arrive." He glanced to Sansa, softening. "Winterfell will be crowded." "It will be alive," she answered, and the words steadied her. "Life is what this castle needs most." But Maester Gulliver, sent from the Citadel weeks prior and chosen in part for his quiet northern mother, cleared his throat. "Another raven, my lady, from the lands of House Frey." He slid a second parchment forward. The wax seal bore twin towers cracked down the middle, as though pressed in haste before cooling. Sansa's shoulders tightened. "Red. Walder Frey, the Black of the Crossing offers recompense," Gulliver began, voice brittle with disbelief. "He proposes hostages exchanged. He will send his grandson Rolf and 2 great-granddaughters south, in return for safe passage of his traders through White Harbor and assurances that Winterfell's armies will not cross the Green Fork to besiege the twins." The Maester paused, eyes flicking upward. "In addition, he writes that he regrets the excesses of Lord Bolton and blames them wholly on that house." Garland made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a growl. "Excesses? 7 hells." Lord Manderley's great hand slammed upon the table, rattling cups. "He thinks to wash his hands with mere words." The old man's voice rumbled like distant surf. "My king's blood cried upon his floors. Let the crossing choke." Sansa considered. The prospect of hostages, even Frey ones, offered leverage she'd lacked. Rolf Frey was a craven by all accounts, but daughters were bargaining chips in these games. "We do not forgive the Red Wedding," she said, voice level. "Yet hostages could temper their treachery. Still, no trade routes reopen until they surrender the killers themselves. Ryman, Black Walder, Lame Lothar, and every conspirator under their roof. Then," Loras tapped the parchment, "send that demand. If they refuse, let the Manderleys launch salt-clad ships up the White Knife and starve them for trade." Manderley's beard parted in a grim smile. "My quay stand ready." Sansa folded the Frey letter. "Maester, draft response at once. No courtesy but what justice requires. Bemnia." As the council turned to the next matter, hard figures of barley stores, tallow counts, lists of smiths required for the next batch of pikeheads, Sansa's gaze strayed to the window. Snow still drifted beyond thick glass, whirling soft spirals over the inner ward where children played between chores. She wondered if Arya might be alive out there somewhere, half-grown amid storms, and if a letter could ever lure her home. Hope ached like an unhealed bone. The meeting stretched until noon, punctuated by quill scratches and the occasional hiss of fresh log into the hearth. When final matters rested, A new grain levy. Plans to mend the great hall's shattered roof beams. Sansa rose. Reed bowed. Garland offered a courtly hand-kiss, and Manderley ambled off muttering about smoking eels for the arriving Vale Lords. Loras lingered. He waited until the door clicked shut, then pulled Sansa gently into an alcove where a threadbare tapestry of Nymeria's voyage hung askew. "You hid the tremor in your hands," he said softly. She lifted her fingers. Indeed, they shook faintly now that business ended. "I keep seeing Robb's face," she whispered. "Every time Frey is mentioned." Loras's thumb brushed her knuckles. "Your brother lives on in these stones. In every soldier who cried his name on the field. The Freys cannot erase him." She leaned against his breastplate, feeling the steel chill through fabric. "Promise me you won't ride south to the crossing yet. Not until the snows soften. Not until the wall itself melts," he said, and kissed her brow. 3 days later, a horn blast split the afternoon quiet. Winterfell's watchers cried, "Riders!" and the outer guard surged to posts. Sansa hurried to the ramparts as hooves thundered up the King's Road. Banner after banner unfurled beneath the gray sky. A golden lion on crimson, a sun-pierced spear, a silver trout leaping on blue and red, and at the column's head a white flag bearing 7-pointed star. Gold cloaks and Tyrell guards flanked a tall litter of carved cedar with shutters open despite the cold. Within sat the High Septon himself, wrapped in embroidered silks too fine for any northern winter. Yet he smiled beatifically, as if the chill were blessing. Behind the holy man rode King Tommen Baratheon in fur-trimmed mantle, cheeks rosy, bright boy's eyes wide at every snowdrift. Beside him, astride a dappled palfrey, Margaery Tyrell waved to villagers peering from walls. Little feet scampered in the bailey below as the gate creaked open. The Queen's arrival brought a hush, then a blossoming cheer. Not thunderous as for Robb's return long ago, but warm, curious, hopeful. Sansa descended the stone stair to greet them. The moment her boots touched packed snow of the yard, Margaery sprang from her saddle and hurried forward. They embraced, their cloaks mingling, the deep rose of Highgarden against the soft green of Winterfell. "Sweet sister," Margaery murmured. At last. Tommen dismounted with Sir Bellanswan's help, eyes darting from rampart to keep. "It's bigger than Ma said." He told no one in particular. The High Septon shuffled out of his litter, sniffing the air like a prissy hound. "Cold, very cold, but cleansing," he proclaimed. "Even King's Landing's sins cannot ride this far north." Sansa welcomed them with formal words of hospitality, though her heart thundered oddly. Tommen's innocence reminded her of Bran before his fall, of sweet Rickon chasing Shaggy Dog between kennels. Grief stabbed, but she masked it. There was ceremony to honor. A procession through gates, warm cider offered. The ancient words of guest, right recited beneath the still unfinished beam of the great hall. When Margaery tasted the bread dipped in salt, she winked at Sansa and whispered, "No flaying tonight, I pray." Later, in her solar, Queen met Lady alone. Shay poured wine and left them. Margaery unpinned her cloak, shoulders trembling beneath silk. "I have news," she said, voice lower than before. "Sir Jaime sent word south by fast courier days ago. Cersei is to be tried as soon as the snows break in King's Landing. Charges of high treason, murder of his Grace's brother, and misuse of crown funds for alchemy stores." Sansa's lips parted, astonished. Jaime moves against his sister. Not alone, the council stands divided. Lord Kevin aids him. The Tyrells, we advised discreetly. Margaery paced, skirts rustling. If Cersei falls, the Lannisters fracture. Tommen will need powerful allies to steady the throne. Sansa crossed to the hearth, staring at flames. "You bring our armies south through this," she said softly, gesturing at the snow-shrouded window, "and the realm will splinter again." Margaery stopped. "We bring Tommen north to show he trusts the Starks. A sign of unity. Your fight against the dead and the Freys becomes King's own cause. When we return with Winterfell secure and dread threats vanquished, you ride with us." Wolf rose beside Lionstag, and Cersei's faction fades to memory. "Metanoity," Sansa considered. It was cunning, the sort of weave Olenna Tyrell might pluck. Yet part of her balked. To entangle Winterfell again in southern politics after so much blood. She touched her stomach, felt the faint rounding beneath gown. "Let the trial proceed without us," she finally said. "Winters are cruel judges, they may claim Cersei before any court. Our road lies north. When the wall stands safe, we will answer the crown's summons." Mantermine. Margaery's face flickered, disappointment or relief, Sansa could not tell. "Then we hold the north together," she agreed, voice gentle. "And when spring comes, we'll ride south with stories of victory to silence every whisper." They clasped hands. Candlelight painted their shadows long upon stone, twin figures leaning toward uncertain future. Days blurred into rhythmic labor. Vale riders began trickling in, armor dusted with frost. The smithy rang night and day, shaping horseshoes and arrowheads. Tyrell engineers fitted water wheels on the millstream to grind grain beneath ice. Bees from Highgarden hives dozed in straw-packed skeps, stored deep in cellars. Come spring they would rove northern flowers, brewing honey new to any tongue. In the kitchens, southern cooks taught northern scullions to bake light lemon cakes, despite low winter sun. Tommen marveled at every corner. He slid down the icy practice yard on a wooden shield, squealed when a snow-laden branch dumped its load on his crown, begged to see the crypts by torchlight. Sansa walked with him, recounting names of kings in the north while fire cracked. He asked if one day he might have a wolf of his own. She promised to speak with the kennel master. Yet unease lingered. Ravens from the wall spoke of unnatural stillness in haunted forest. No wildling raids, no game ensnares, only a silence that weighed upon men's hearts. Stannis held moat of the Ebony Gate now, but his letters carried fear. "The north wind feels wrong," Davos wrote. "It whispers in voices I dare not follow." Sansa shared each message with Loras and Reed. They agreed. Their host must ride after the first full thaw, no matter how deep the snow still lay. Preparations intensified. The Godswood became a training ground. Archers loosed shafts among sentinel trees, careful never to scar the new weirwood. Loras drilled a company of mixed northern and Reach youth, forming them into light cavalry for scouting on frozen trails. He named them the Frost Roses, and Sansa embroidered badges of green and silver for their cloaks. When she pricked her finger on a needle's kiss, she thought of her mother sewing standards long ago. Blood and thread entwined. One cold morning as dawn blushed faintly purple, Sansa climbed the bell tower for air. From that height, Winterfell spread beneath her. White roofs, rising rings of smoke, the steaming hot pools in the inner yard, like clouds captured in basins. Beyond walls, the world lay vast and silent. Then she saw movement by the western woodline. A lone figure on shaggy horse slogging through drifts, cloak torn and face covered with hoarfrost. Guards hurried forth, spears at ready. Sansa hurried too, heart running ahead of feet. When the stranger dismounted, he nearly collapsed. Ice crusted his beard, eyes ringed by exhaustion. Yet when his cowl fell, she knew him at once, Theon Greyjoy, or what remained of him. Gray hair streaked his temples, skin drawn taut. A jagged brand marred his cheek, but the eyes were still sea green. He knelt awkwardly, snow squealing beneath knees. "My lady," he croaked, voice raw-got. "I come to beg pardon." Sansa's throat closed. Memories smashed through. Theon's smirk at Winterfell feast, his betrayal, brothers slain in practice yard. Then later rumors of his torment in Bolton hands. She swallowed bile. Why here? Why now? Theon lifted trembling hands. "I escaped the Dreadfort before your army marched. I saw what he did." A shudder tore him. "I know secret ways beneath the wall. Passages Ramsay used to spy on black brothers for sport. If you march north you will need them." Guards looked to Sansa. Anger warred with chill pity. She felt both like twin knives under ribs. She turned to Brienne, standing grim. "Chain him, but gently. Warm him, feed him. Then bring him to council. The gods will judge his soul. We will judge his worth." Snow fell heavier as she spoke. In its hush, Theon's shoulders sagged, relief or resignation. Sansa watched as he was led past stables, where dogs whined uneasily. Perhaps redemption lay even for him, perhaps not. Either way, Winter cared little for past sins when survival demanded all. That night she dreamed of Bran standing in the godswood beneath the new sapling. His eyes were white, no pupil, no iris. And when he spoke, ravens spilled from his mouth, black wings beating. "Open the gate," he said. "Open the gate for the living before the dead arrive, or all will freeze together." She reached for him, but the weirwood roots coiled around her ankles, holding her fast. She woke slick with sweat despite frigid air. At dawn, she found Reed walking perimeter of godswood, muttering in ancient tongue. She told him the dream. His brow furrowed. "Green sight visits the blood of the first men," he said. "Perhaps your brother speaks through tree and snow. We must heed." They summoned council once more. Tyrell brothers, Manderly, Brienne, even Theon, wrapped in spare cloak. A map of the gift lay on table, ink dots marking watchposts long abandoned. Theon's finger traced twisting canyons beneath Frostfang foothills. "Bolton tunnels start here," he whispered. "Carved by smugglers centuries past, widened for Ramsay's hunts. One branch reaches within bowshot of Castle Black. Another opens north of the wall below the gorge." "Then done." Reed closed his eyes, remembering unseen landscapes. If dead things march south, such tunnels risk breach behind the wall. "We cannot leave them." Loras drummed knuckles. "Then part of our host rides even in deep snow. Closes passages with oil and stone. A spear of light before main force." He looked to Sansa. "Send the frost roses and a hand-picked wedge." Sansa hesitated. Too soon? Supplies were scarce, roads treacherous. Yet Bran's plea echoed. She nodded. 10 days hence. Tommen will remain here under Queen Margaery's guard. The main host marches a moon later, when snowcrust can bear wagons. We burn those tunnels or seal them with the bones of any walker foolish enough to follow. None of her. So it was written. A two-pronged plan, swift and bold. In quiet hours, Sansa wondered if boldness were wisdom or hubris. But each time doubt threatened, she pictured the ice of Bran's eyes and the world beyond, silent and waiting. The days to departure passed in a blur. Blacksmiths quenched final sword blades. Leatherers stitched mittens lined with hair fur. Maester Gulliver measured Sansa's belly discreetly and confirmed what her heart already knew. Life quickened inside, tiny as snowflake, strong as spring root. She told Loras under the new weirwood's branches at twilight. His breath caught like frost tears in air. Then he kissed her until stars flickered overhead. Word spread, gentle and hushed. Old Nan, near blind now, insisted on weaving a baby blanket of direwolf fur and silken rose petals. When her gnarled fingers dropped stitches, Shay slipped in to guide them. Garland composed a lullaby on lute, though he claimed soldiers' hands lacked grace. Tommen presented Sansa with a carved wolf pup, made himself with penknife. Its head sat lopsided. But she set it on mantle with pride. Yet joy mingled with weight. She would ride still. Maester assured Shirney's safe until belly grew. But she must armor herself and unborn both. Garland commissioned a light brigandine etched with vines, lined in padded wool so clever it could be let out as she swelled. When he presented it, Loras fastened the clasps with almost reverent care. On the eve before the frost roses left, a feast filled the hall. Tables groaned with spiced venison, honeyed carrots, and Tyrell wine glowing amber. Mummers danced in wolf masks, reed singers piped airy woodman tunes. Sansa raised a cup of watered cider, voice ringing against stone still scarred by Bolton fires. Tomorrow, brave riders carve path north not for conquest, but for light. May their courage guide us, and their valor remind us that from Winterfell's stones grows hope anew. Cups clashed. Cheers soared. Yet Theon sat hunched at edge, untouched plate before him. When revels waned, Sansa approached. He started to rise, but she laid a hand on his shoulder. "You ride also," she said quietly. "Know this, if your aim is true, you may yet earn place among the living." His sea-green eyes filled with something fragile. Gratitude, perhaps, or grief. "I will not fail again." His whisper sounded like vow to ghost within. Cold dawn birthed departure. Snow-whitened sky, keen wind. Frost roses lined the yard in columns. 300 riders, mixed northern shaggy ponies and reach coursers, blanketed in wool. Their ringmail gleamed, new badges stitched at shoulder. At front sat Loras, helm crested with green plume. Beside him, Brienne, astride massive warhorse, cloak swirling. Theon, plain in leather and mail, rode lank gelding stolen from the Dreadfort stables. Reed scouts blended into tree line, bone-handled spears ready. Sansa stood upon the stone steps with Margaery and Tommen. Trumpets cried, gate chains clanked, and the wedge flowed into blinding whiteness, banners snapping. Children hurled handfuls of snow as farewell. The horses churned it to powder that drifted like stardust. Long after hooves faded, Sansa remained, hand on barely swelling womb. She whispered prayer to the old gods, and the new to the seven she half believed, to nameless forces older than men. She prayed for Lora's swift return, for Bran's safety wherever ravens perched, for Arya's feet to find home, for Jon at the wall unseen. Snowflakes melted on her cheeks, indistinguishable from tears. In weeks to come she would meet dawns alone, watching for riders' silhouettes on wolf-white horizon. She would greet Vale columns, hear southern bells ring through boreal air, command forging of dragon-glass arrowheads, rumored effective against night fiends. She would write letters sealed with wolf rose to queens, to maesters, to princes across narrow sea she had never met. She would walk crypts and feel child kick, steadfast as heartbeats. And beyond forests, beyond the shattered weirwood stump now sprouting tender leaves, Loras's spear point would shimmer in slant winter sun as he led his frost roses through haunted passes, toward tunnels carved by greed and sealed by fear, toward silence so vast it swallowed breath, toward an enemy whispered by old wives and sworn brothers and greening book, toward destiny, knotting the lives of wolf, rose, and all the realm between. The first of those fates broke 2 nights after the riders vanished. A raven battered the rookery shutters, feathers rimed with ice, almost too weak to croak. Gulliver found it at dawn, message cylinder crusted white. He thawed it by brazier and brought the strip of parchment to Sansa still damp. 4 words only scrawled in cramped hand. Sansa did not know yet felt. They come, blue fire. Her heart lurched. She thought of Bran's warning, of snowfields north of the wall. She remembered old stories Nan told. Ice spiders big as hounds, white shadows bone pale. She closed her eyes, felt child stir, felt palace weight of all they had built, and in that hush she understood. Battle for Winterfell was prologue. She straightened, voice calm when she spoke to Margaery. Rouse the castle, double watches, smiths to forges, fletchers to shafts. The night's storm arrived sooner than hoped. Margaery's throat bobbed, but she nodded. Together they strode from Solar, cloaks flaring. Footsteps echoed through corridors as bells clanged alarm for drills. Fires stoked, armor pulled from racks, prayers murmured beneath breath. The wheel of fate turned once more, creaking ancient bones. Yet for all the chill fear, beneath it burned fierce light. Sansa felt it as she passed courtyard, where the new weirwood sapling branches shivered in wind. She paused, placed palm on bark still smooth, and whispered words only tree and gods might hear. We will stand. And far in the snow-blown valleys, where Loras' company knelt upon frozen ground staring across night-ashen wastes, a howl rose. Distant, unearthly. And with it he felt the brush of something warm in his chest, as though a rose blooming behind iron. He drew breath, lifted sword, and readied to face whatever marched by blue fire's glow. The north awaited its longest night. The wolf rose blossomed beneath snow, defiant, bright. Characters scattered like sparks across vast canvas now marched together toward Shadow's edge, and in their echoing steps began the forging of legend neither lion nor dragon could claim alone. Storm clouds swelled over Winterfell on the morning the Vale Knights arrived en masse. 30 wagons creaked through the east gate, horse teams snorting plumes. Steel-shod hooves rang on stone. Banners of Royce bronze, Redfort red towers, Corbray-winged swords, all snapping in fierce wind. Robert Arryn rode reclined in a padded litter, cheeks flushed unhealthy pink, but excitement brightened his pale eyes as he gazed at the monstrous direwolf statue atop the gatehouse. Sansa greeted him in the yard. The boy lord clambered down aided by silent sisters, assigned to tend his frailty. He bowed awkwardly. "Lady Sansa," he piped, "I have come to see snows as deep as towers." "You may yet," she said kindly, "if winter's mood worsens." Behind Robert, dismounted Sir Nestor Royce, broad-shouldered and gruff. He knelt. "The moon and falcon swear to the wolf rose till death or dawn." Sansa raised him. "Rise, my lord. Food and fires await." Despite bitter wind, the castle bustled. Vale engineers unloaded grain mills, mules carried cedar beams for new watchtowers, knights clanged practice axes against oak posts with northern sergeants barking time. Tommen ran among them trailing a shaggy pup gifted by the kennel master. Hostling, he called it, though the black and white beast bore little resemblance to Jon's direwolf of legend. Laughter followed in his wake, a crack in Worry's shell. At dusk reedsmen blew signal horns. Returning scouts. Sansa rushed to parapet, heart hammering. 5 riders crossed snowy expanse. Frost roses, weary but alive. 2 supported a third slumped in saddle, crimson staining mail. At their rear, a riderless destrier dragged broken reins. At gate they slid from horses, steam rising from sweat-drenched flanks. Sansa descended, cloak swirling. Brienne met her, face streaked with road grime. "We need Maester," she rasped. "Dead things beyond the gorge. We sealed one tunnel with fire, but others remain." Sansa's gaze darted. "And Lord Loras?" Brienne's steel-blue eyes softened. "He lives. Holds a watch at Snowgate Ravine 3 days north. Sent me ahead to warn." Relief nearly felled Sansa. She steadied herself. "Come," she ordered. "We treat the wounded. Then counsel at once." When night settled, torches turned snowfields amber. In the solar Brienne recounted horror. How they rode within the gorge's cavernous maw, torchlight catching frost-rimed bones. How wind moaned like lost souls, and how shapes emerged. Figures pale as moonlit milk, eyes glowing cerulean, blades of ice that could shatter steel. They moved silent except crack of frozen air around them. The frost roses fought, arrows of dragon glass shattering white skulls, fire arrows roaring in passage. They collapsed timber braces, flooded halls with oil, sealed one tunnel as white shadows retreated. But 2 more mouths gaped still. "The dead can flank Castle Black through those passages," Brienne said. "We must close them." Theon, standing aside, spoke hoarsely. "Ramsay used secret caches farther west. Storehouses of pitch." He coughed. "I know paths." Council debated hour upon hour. Some urged retreat behind Winterfell's walls. Reed scolded. "Walls crumble when ice storms rise. We meet foe on ground of our choosing." Garland proposed sending hawk-fast riders to Dragonstone. Rumors swore Queen Daenerys had landed in Dorne with dragons in tow, though none yet confirmed. Fire might meet ice. In the end, they resolved to dispatch a second, larger force. Stark spears, Vale heavy horse, Tyrell engineers with wagon loads of pitch, to meet Loras and seal remaining tunnels, then hold a line south of the wall until Stannis and Night's Watch could rally. Margaery agreed to steward Winterfell alongside Wyman, Manderley, using her charm and his bulk to keep lords civil. Robert Arryn, enthralled by notion of battle but prone to fainting spells, would remain under Septa's care. Sansa would ride with the new host. Maester Gulliver protested, citing her condition. She silenced him with gentle hand. "My child is of north and reach both. If the wall falls, where is safe? Better I ride where fate beckons." That night she stood at open window, moon a pale scythe above. Snowflakes danced on breeze. She pressed fingers to womb, felt no kick, yet presence strong as heartbeat in her blood. She whispered lullaby old Nan once sang, of brave little bear wandering ice fields, but guided home by stars' glow. The melody wove with wind until she could not tell where her voice ended and night began. Dawn saw another march. Horns low and mournful, hooves crunching crusted snow. Sansa rode at center on gray mare armored in boiled leather. Her brigandine fit snug, cloak lined with fox. Brienne rode flank, sword Oathkeeper gleaming amber in sunrise. Reed's crannogmen flitted along column edges like shadows, spears and nets ready. Theon, thinner now but steady, guided them through old hunter trails twisting between iced lakes. Behind, Winterfell receded, banners atop towers shrinking to points. Margaery stood on rampart, fur hood framing smile bright yet brittle. Tommen waved half-heartedly, pup yapping at heels. Sansa forced smile back, heart warping with fear and hope entwined. Mountains rose in distance, blue smudges sharpening into white fangs. Each league north, cold deepened. Wolves howled nights, their cries answering horns. Frost bit steel, breath steamed like dragon smoke. Yet camaraderie warmed them. Vale knights sharing southern lemons candied in sugar. Stark men teaching them to wrap hands in deerskin. Tyrell engineers leading songs of Garth and spring that lifted trudging feet. On seventh night, they found Loras' camp at Snowgate Ravine. Torch fires flickering along cliff base. Cheers erupted as scouts announced arrival. Sansa dismounted, nearly stumbling in haste. Loras crossed expanse, helm under arm, snow-dusting hair. His smile carved creases of exhaustion, but when he clasped her to him strength surged anew. Around them men exchanged grins. Sudden hush blossomed as they realized Lady and Lord reunited. They withdrew to canvas command tent, packed with maps and braziers. Heat stung cheeks. Loras recounted days since tunnel collapse. Patrols harassed by whites. Unslept nights listening to distant ice cracking like thunder beneath starlight. They test our lines, he said. We hold for now, but if more flood through, we break. Sansa studied ink strokes marking tunnels. We seal these two. Then we ride to Castle Black and garrison until reinforcements from Stannis and the wall muster. Brienne added, with dragonglass we can cull their numbers, but without fire they rise again. An engineer stepped forward, Tyrell badge at breast. We brought barrels of wildfire from King's Landing, my lady. Enough to drown passages in green hell. Sansa's stomach twisted. She recalled wildfire's roar at Blackwater Bay. Green flames devouring ships and men. Yet, dire threat demanded dire measures. She nodded. Then we use it, but carefully. Morning broke amid swirl of flurries. Operation began. Crannogmen slipped into first tunnel's mouth under cover of darkness. Theon leading. Reed's songs to bog gods murmured low as they spaced wildfire casks along stony ribs. Archers watched ridge above for pale forms. When last man emerged, they lit fuses of pitch-soaked rope, running as sparks bit through snow. The explosion shook mountains. White roar burst from crevice, plume of emerald fire painting dawn sky sickly jade. Ice melted, then refroze mid-air, raining needle shards. A cheer rose, raw, exhilarated, half terrified. Second tunnel demanded blood. As engineers rolled casks inside, whites erupted from depth. Skeletal figures clad in ragged furs, eyes blazing blue. A white walker strode among them on bone-thin steed, spear of crystal glittering. Screams split morning quiet. First rank of reach pikemen faltered as cold deep beyond winter seeped into flesh. Brian charged, Oathkeeper burning crimson in sunrise. Reed spears lanced from snowbanks. Corbray knights rallied. The fight turned chaotic ballet of light and ice. Sansa found herself gripping dagger at saddle strap. Mind racing. She resisted urge to rush. Her duty command, not duel. Loras speared through cluster of whites, rose-etched armor frosted but shining. He locked blades with White Walker. Steel shrieked. Sansa's pulse thundered as she watched. She called for archers. Dragonglass. Aim true. A shaft feathered, in black whistled, striking Walker's temple. It shattered in icy mist. Creature shrieked, but did not fall. Loras ducked, swung again. His blade skittered off crystalline haft. Brienne lunged, plunging Oathkeeper through creature's abdomen. Valyrian steel met ice. Fissures spidered. Walker's body exploded into shards that burst like frost glass. The wights screamed, faltered, and archers rained dragonglass until silence. Wildfire fuses lit. Second tunnel collapsed with monstrous hiss of green fury. When smoke cleared, only scorched stone remained, slick with glass and melted snow. Sansa exhaled, knees weak. But victory bore cost. 7 dead, 19 wounded, 1 missing. Among fallen lay Sir Vince Redford, Vale Knight of proud line. Among wounded, Theon Greyjoy, gash along ribs where white claws rent flesh. He murmured delirious regrets as Maester stitched, but his eyes shone clear of malice for first time. The host buried dead beneath cairns of ice and stone. Sansa spoke words over graves. Half from Seven, half from nameless north. She placed rose petals frozen crisp in each mound, symbol of reach and memory. Snow began again, gentle curtain veiling world. 2 days later, ravens arrived from Castle Black. Jon Snow, chosen Lord Commander, by slim margin and rumor of speaking ravens casting decisive vote. Sansa's heart surged with pride and ache. Brother alive, raised to command against night. She wrote it once, ink blotting with tears. The North rides to you, hold fast. They marched for the wall through lash of icy wind. Nights grew colder. Aurora flickered like ghost fires across sky. One evening as campfires crackled, Reed approached Sansa, eyes distant. Dream came, he said. Your brother Bran stands at heart of a great tree of crystal, roots sunk in rivers of time. He calls the North's blood to knit together before dawn of dead. We must bring Vale, Reach, North, Watch, and Southron dragons to one flame, or all sparks go dark. Sansa touched his arm. We weave as best we can. In her mind she pictured circles widening. Tommen sheltered at Winterfell, Margaery soothing lords. Vale and Reach horse beneath her banner, Jon at wall, Bran beyond in mysteries. Threads stretched fragile but shining. At last the wall loomed. Endless cliff of white-tinged rose by sunset. Fires dotted its summit, black brothers hailing from ramparts. Gates groaned open. Jon descended in dark cloak, trimmed with frost. His face bore new weight, yet when he embraced Sansa Snow, dusted her lashes like tears, and she felt small again in safe arms. They spoke long in Commander's solar while wind howled outside. Jon praised sealing tunnels. Night's Watch had felt earth shake. He warned a vast horde massing in Frostfangs. Torment giants Bane brings wildlings south to join us, but walkers drive them like sheep. Stannis camped east, battered by storm. Supplies dwindled. Sansa offered Tyrell grain, Vale axes, Reach engineers. Jon's eyes glimmered with hope. They laid maps across table, Winterfell south, Dreadfort ashes, King's Landing distant. If dragons truly landed, Jon mused, their fire could sunder night. She thought of green wildfires, of blue fire eyes, of red dragon flame, yet unseen, colors of war swirling like banners in storm. In days that followed, they fortified. Dragonglass mined on Dragonstone shipped via White Harbor. Valyrian steel blades, shared from Reach of Old Town collectors. Each arrow and spear point, dipped in obsidian. Loras drilled Black Brothers in Reach tactics. Vale masons reinforced gate with ironwood braces. Sansa walked ramparts each dawn, child kicking stronger, snow painting world to silver. One morning a lone rider staggered out of swirling white. Davos Seaworth, beard caked with rime, bearing parchment bearing flame-colored seal. Queen Daenerys invited northern envoys to parley at Carhold, having landed dragons on Skago's stony shores after storms blew fleet north of intended Dorne. Marooned by ice, she marched inland seeking allies. Hope blazed. Sansa assembled council at once. Jon, weary but resolute, agreed. Meet her, but not all kings can ride. He must hold wall. Sansa, Reed, Davos, and a chosen escort would journey east. Loras insisted to guard wife and child. but she begged him remain to lead heavy horse should walkers breach. Loras relented, barely. The next dawn saw Sansa ride east beneath pale sun haloed by frost. Snowdrifts knee-high, wind knifing. Yet her heart beat fierce. Bran's vision of unions kindled, each step forging path toward braided fate. Wolf, rose, dragon, ice. The child within stirred, perhaps hearing distant roar of wings. And thus story wound on, threads weaving across white expanse into tapestry vast as winter sky. Battles yet unfought, betrayals yet unsprung, alliances yet forged under dance of aurora and shadow of looming wall. But for that moment, beneath brittle blue heavens, Lady Sansa Tyrell Stark rode with hope bright as newborn flame, leading realm's best chance into dawn of longest night.